Welcome to the Reel Study with your hosts, Mr. Snitbits.
I was pleasantly surprised.
Black Girl Marvel.
I cried laughing. That was hilarious.
Tyler the filmmaker.
It's like so much depth. It's like nowadays it's, you got A shot, B shot.
All the movie things.
There's some great wide shots in this.
Janine DeBean.
Each other. They just kind of look like they were having fun and doing their own thing.
Produced by Hyena. And me, the Reel Study movie voice guy.
But this was the first time where I got to see it told in a way where I was like, oh man.
Let's go to the poster wall.
Hello and welcome to the Reel Study. I am Mr. Snitbits, and with me tonight I've got Janine the Bean, Tyler the filmmaker. We will be visited by Black Girl Marvel here very soon, but we'll wait for her to join us. But tonight we've got two special guests, the co-hosts of the Let Us In podcast, JustineUFF and Emma of the Impact, which of course you can find them on most social media sites, especially the newer ones like Blue Sky. So do check them out there, and of course TikTok, since it's still here, weirdly.
Terrifying.
Weirdly, yeah. But tonight, speaking of terrifying, we are going to get into a couple of body horror films. These are, of course, the more visceral horror films you can get into. The Fly from 1986, starring Jeff Goldblum, directed by David Cronenberg. And then we have The Substance, which, of course, was released last year and is kind of the tour de force for Demi Moore, which is great to see her back. Before we do that, we're going to move over to the main wall. And I will go ahead and plug the social media. We are The Reel Study, and we are on every social media platform that you can think of, including ones you might not have heard of, like Fanbase and Clapper and other various places. We're going to be on those as well. So please follow us everywhere. Join our Discord if you want to recommend a movie and see if we'll say yes. We kind of just say yes to everything unless we just don't have time. Of course, our guests picked the films this evening, and we'll get into what made them choose these two films, which, of course, they pair very nicely together. But before we do that, I want to say hi to JustineUFF and Emma. And go ahead, Justin, and tell us about your podcast and, your TikToks and kind of what you do as a content creator.
Sure. So Emma and I actually met on TikTok and then decided later with Crystal, Creepin' It Spooky, that we were going to start a podcast. So we started Let Us In Podcast. It's a very female-centered podcast focusing on the female perspective when it comes to horror. But that's not all we focus on. We just love horror, so we love to talk about it. We're Flanistans for sure, so we're big fans of Flanagan. We have different personalities and loves of certain tropes in horror. So we bring a lot of different perspectives to the podcast. And we have a website now, as well as our YouTube channel, of course. And we will continue to be making content as we can. It's good to have a voice out there in horror that's not just the same broski voice,
Agreed. Emma, tell us your experience with the Let Us In podcast and what do you do on TikTok? And I've seen you on other platforms because you do more than just content creation. You're also, I believe, a model. Is that right?
I'm a photographer.
Ah, okay.
I rarely let anybody else take a picture of me in a artistic sense. So I am the model and photographer. I'm mostly the model because I'm cheap and available. So to myself anyway. For the Let Us In podcast, it's really woken me up to how much I love talking about film, and I've been very inspired by Crystal, Creepin' It Spooky, and JustineUFF, Justine, who's here, by the way. I am starting a new podcast. It's a little too soon to talk about it, but you all are invited. Some of you have already been contacted. Justine, you can just come whenever you want to my podcast. I knew, as I said that, I knew people were going to start laughing. It is about film, but yes, I'm a professional photographer, and I bring a little snark, I guess. I don't know.
Nothing wrong with snark. We appreciate
the brain of the operation too when it comes to knowing stuff. I mean, well, I make a point. I like to do a lot of research. Yeah, it's when people say watching movies aren't hobbies. I'm like,
They're my life. They're my life. Are you like? I don't want to hear they're not hobbies, because for me, it's just more than just a casual viewing. All right. Do you know how many director's commentaries I've listened to more than once? That's not a brag,
those
really, but I'm just
BTSs,
saying that's
right?
a hobby.
Yes.
Right? I hear that. Tyler, we haven't seen you in a while. How you been doing?
Live. I'm here. I'm going. Yeah, and that's about it. Exciting. Thank you very much. And I'm gonna exit the podcast now.
Now,
That's it.
Tyler's
That's all I
being
got.
bashful,
I'm not as
but
exciting as everybody else. I don't know what to tell you.
Tyler is on a workout, like not bender, but he is a not body. Are you a bodybuilder? Would you consider yourself a bodybuilder?
No, I just do
But you
it for,
do love working out and
myself.
building your body up, right? And if you follow Tyler, you'll see movie stuff, and then you'll see him showing off his body constantly. It's one or the other.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but he's bashful
Showing
about
off
it. But
game.
he'll post the videos, you know.
I'm
but
glad you
it's all
didn't
workout
describe
stuff.
me that way, because it's kind of not completely untrue.
Well, but he's always, he's always doing some of these, and it's great. No, I love it. I support all of what you do, Tyler. So I appreciate it. Janine, how you been?
I've been doing okay. Just watching some things. I've been trying to do an MCU rewatch, which feels a bit daunting. I don't think I'll get through everything before Captain America, but I need to support the Black Captain America. I want that movie to do well for that purpose. So I'm trying, working my way through, and trying not to stress about things going on in the world, but
And that's why we're here, right? We're here to try to take your mind off of
exactly.
things and just talk about great
And
movies.
It helps a
Right?
ton.
Well, we appreciate that, and we it helps me as well. So I appreciate y'all as well.
Yes.
I did see somebody try to basically break down the most important MCU films for watching
Yeah.
Captain America.
So
and
I
so you
think
can
I
kinda
might
take that
just
route,
chuck it all and go through somebody's breakdown or watch through or
right?
yeah.
Plus, you're like me; you've probably seen them a few too many times at this point.
Yeah. I pretty much know what I need to know. So yeah, I might
Right.
just do a rewatch of Falcon and the Winter Soldier and call it a day. But we'll see.
Oh, God, I love that series so much.
It's great, right?
It was so fun.
So we've got Law here, which was great because we cut away from Janine, and now we have Law, which is fantastic. Law, how are you doing? Do we have her yet? Maybe not. Okay. Until we know we do have her, we will get right into our Reel Roundups. This is, of course, the segment where we talk about any newer movies that we've seen or haven't seen but have seen this week, or something we just are passionate about and want to bring up. So why don't we start with our guests? Justine, you saw Wicked this week?
I did. I finally watched Wicked. I didn't go see it in theater. I didn't see a lot of movies in theater this year, but I have a big screen, so I could just watch it. It's like the theater. It's close enough. So I got Wicked and finally watched it. I tried watching it with my daughter. It was a little too sad for her. So she started crying at a particular point and was like, we got to change it. So I had to stop watching it and come back and finish it. I also was very surprised by how sad this is. And from a perspective of someone who has only seen the original Wizard of Oz, never read the books, never seen the musical, have no other frame of reference for this except for other films about this universe. Is that what we would call it? I didn't expect it to be so sad. I hear songs like Popular and Defying Gravity, and I heard them so much on TikTok that I knew the words when they came up on the film. I just didn't know that it was going to be so sad, but also so visceral with the messaging.
Yeah, topical as well.
Yeah. Oh God, it felt so relevant. And I mean, of course, it's a sad thing to say, but these types of messages and stories are relevant every 5 years, it seems like. They're never not relevant, I should say. And I didn't expect to be so... My face was just wet the whole movie, just crying the whole time. It was so emotional for me. I'm already someone who loves musicals, and I feel like musicals tend to be more emotional. And I don't know, Like Moulin Rouge is one of those movies that I could watch a million times, but now ever since I'd say the first couple times I turned it off after a certain point. We all know what point that is, I'm sure, if you've seen Moulin Rouge. But it just gets real sad after that, and I don't want to watch it anymore. But Wicked is just, I don't know. It feels like you're doing this with your emotions the whole time. With every song beat, you're changing your feelings, and it just really heightens all of that emotion. But I really, really enjoyed it. I could see the flaws that people talked about as far as like the look of the film. It definitely could have been, I don't know, it almost matched tone. It felt a little hollow sometimes as far as like the way Galinda's personality is, the way most people were very superficial. That's kind of how a lot of the look of the film was, very superficial. I don't know. It was
strive not to be a Galinda. That's like that's a little Galinda here today. I'm gonna like it's Alphaba's big moment at the train, right? And it's like I'm kind of being a Glinda right now because I'm interrupting Justine, but it's like Alphaba's big moment at the train, and she's going to Oz, and it's a big deal, and she's announcing, "I'm changing my name to Glinda for this." Oh, shut up.
Oh, it's totally,
and I've read the book, which is
white
totally different.
white girl savior complex.
Like everybody
the
look at
most
me.
easy to like consume way, like hollow actions.
Yes.
Without
I think
any
part of
risk
why I
to
dislike her,
like popularity, like never at the risk to herself until there's an opportunity for her to do something that is at the risk of herself, and she doesn't.
Well, I think part of why I feel so strongly against Glinda is because I've seen those things in myself. You know, we all work on getting better, but you know, I think when there's such a reaction to a character, it's like, do you see a little bit of yourself in there?
That's a good point.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That's a very good point.
100%.
I know what you mean, Justine, about the I think the CGI is what makes it feel hollow to some degree. I know there's big, beautiful sets, but that background feels, I don't know, not magical, maybe just not there. I don't know. I know what you meant by it, though.
Yeah.
Jeff
Emma,
Goldblum could still get it.
Right. Emma, you got to see a movie this week. What was this movie you saw?
I saw Criminally Insane. Basically, it's a 70s film, and I know because I've listened to the director's commentary, it's not as quick-witted as I'd like it to thought it was, but I'm going to believe it in my head. It's basically a woman that lives in a larger body is let out of the insane asylum with her grandmother, and her grandmother decides, you need to stop eating so much. Like, you know, she's just trying to live her life. She's making more food than most people would, which again, it indulges in stereotypes of living in a larger body, like because you're in a larger body, you eat a certain way and it's gross and all that. But at the same time, it has a catharsis to it because like she kills everybody. And no one in this movie is likable. There's slurs and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like, I'm a grown woman. If somebody locked all the food and everything away from me so I can eat 3 square meals a day, I might kill somebody. So
being hangry is a thing.
It is a thing, and it's a serious thing. And there's a second one I haven't seen yet that is shot in SOV, which draws me in. And then there's one from, I believe, 2012. That's the third one. So I think it's very much of the times of those low budget 70s films that is still shot on film as opposed to when SOV. It would have been SOV, the first one, if it were available. And it has its charm. It makes you feel gross, but it's supposed to. So I love films like that. I like feeling gross.
It might be why you picked the film you picked for this evening. Maybe. There might be a correlation there.
There might be.
Janine, you got to see Clint Eastwood's what potentially might be his final film as a director, and it's Juror Number 2. What did you think?
Yeah, I saw it was on Max, so I decided to check it out because I'm a fan of a good courtroom drama thriller type thing. Basically sees Nicholas Holt as somebody who gets jury duty. He seems like a pretty regular guy. His wife has a baby on the way. His wife's played by Zoe Deutsch. And he's really not wanting to do jury duty because, you know, she had a very difficult pregnancy loss. So this pregnancy, she's really kind of scared. So he wants to be home with her, but he is forced to do this jury duty. And to not give too much away, he finds out that he's more involved in the actual case than he realized. So it brings up some really interesting twists there. Overall, I enjoyed it, but I felt like it was a little slow in terms of the pacing. And I think it felt a little too kind of excited about its own idea. Like, we got a really good idea here, but it wasn't fully executed all that well. Nicholas Holt, I think he doesn't come off as likable as you want him to as well. So that was kind of disappointing because he's kind of the main one we're following. I did like seeing a little reunion between him and Toni Collette from About a Boy. It was kind of fun to see them together in a movie again now that he's like all grown up. She plays the lawyer who is on the end of the case where somebody is accused of killing his girlfriend, and she's the DA, so she's going against this person. And so she gives a great performance. She's trying to do a Southern accent, but it sounds almost too much like her Australian accent.
I was gonna say, it would be hard to not get those confused.
Yeah. Like, I thought she was using her regular accent at first, and then it started coming out a little muddled. Generally, I think it's a good story. I liked kind of the twist of it, and we get the twist fairly early on, but it just moved a little too slow for my liking.
Because people talked a lot of crap about the fact that this got no big release, and from what you're describing, I think that might be why.
Yeah, I think it was perfect for. Yeah, I think it was perfect for at home. Like,
okay.
Yeah. So if you like courtroom films, I think it sits in a nice spot, but the plot moves at a bit of a sluggish pace for me.
So it's not a few good men, right?
No, definitely no shouting matches in the courtroom.
Clint, don't shout at the chair. Just sit in it.
Yeah.
Just throw back.
How long it was, I believe. Did you
what was
catch
the
that,
time
Janine?
on it? There's just like a certain. I don't know if
Can you hear
me.
Tyler? He's asking Janine how long the film is.
Sorry. Yeah, I think it was about 2 hours. Yeah.
Okay. Only because like I've been on this thing now. Like if I see it, I know this might be bad, but like if I see a certain runtime, I have to.
You're like no.
Like that's a commitment. Like it's really
I
gotta
mean,
be that kind of movie. Like
I appreciate you respecting the time
minutes.
that much. Like more people should do that. Should like look at the time. Like, do I have time for this? Could I be doing something else?
Or am I going to give this my full attention?
I was like, I'm gonna need that's gonna be a sitter. I'm gonna call it a sitter.
No, it was just a little slow. So yeah, you probably I don't know if you want to give your time to it, but
Nicholas Holt's almost a draw for me, but hearing what you said, I'm like, I was already on the fence, so I'm not sure. Maybe I need 365 films this year. Anyway,
I mean, I think the twist is really interesting. So yeah.
Okay. So they did have something, but maybe they played it up too much. That they were too good at their twist.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Tyler, you got to see. It looks like you saw 2 movies this week: A Real Pain and Flow. Do you have a preference? What you'd like to
talk about like A Real Pain. I think that one really hit for sure.
Okay.
It's Jesse Eisenberg's like sophomore film. I saw the one that he did before. It had like Finn Wolfhard. It's another A24 film. I didn't totally like that one. Every time I think of Jesse Eisenberg, it's very like The Social Network. Like I see him as Mark Zuckerberg and like his type of
That's so sad.
very monotone.
He's the opposite of that guy.
It's like, ugh, stop.
Yeah. But basically,
And Lex
movies about,
Luthor.
like, these...
Right.
Yeah, and Lex Luthor. Same guy. But it's just like buddy comedy. It's like these 2 cousins who go on like this odyssey to kind of like reconnect with sort of their like Jewish roots. But like past all of that too, I think this movie, I don't know, somehow Jesse Eisenberg became one of the most relatable people in the runtime of this movie. Like, I did not think I was going to be able to like connect with it that much, but I think it really captures like anxiety, and I don't know, it just spoke to me a lot with that. Like, feeling like the world, like everything that's going on in the world is like somehow your fault, or um anything that you're going through, like any of the problems that you're going through isn't as like important, or isn't as, devastating as, like in this movie, like the Holocaust or something, right? Because you think of like everything that led up to you being born and you being on this planet now, and like you're thinking about all your problems, but thinking about all the things that everyone else had to go through for you to be here, kind of thing. um but yeah, the performances are really great. um Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. If you're someone who has a lot of anxiety, like social anxiety, I think this one will really like hit you real hard.
That's me.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm glad you pre-warned
So
me.
Yeah.
it's so funny because just last night I rewatched She's All That, and Kieran Culkin plays the little brother in that.
Yeah.
And there's some really funny mannerisms that he has in that movie that you can see are just him, because he does it in like
He says it.
interviews
Yeah.
and stuff
Mhm.
too. Like his little like
Yeah.
eye roll thing that he does.
Yeah.
He does it in the movie, and it's
That is
so,
so
I don't know,
funny.
it's so funny to
He's
watch.
the
I
best
love
Culkin.
Kieran Culkin. Yeah, he really is. He really is. And that's why I want to see that movie pretty bad, actually, just because I want to see how Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg play off of each other in a film. Because in interviews, they're so fun to watch. It's like
Mhm.
Yeah,
watching
their
test
energies are
subjects
so
almost.
different, but it works.
They're
Yeah.
so, yeah. It's like watching a science experiment when they're talking to each other or about each other, because they're so different. Yeah.
I think that's what was fun about watching the movie, because like I think I got especially interested after watching interviews with them, and then watching the movie.
Mhm.
It's pretty much that, like
Okay.
for
Oh, that's
like an hour and
awesome.
a half, like
So now I found another movie to add to my list. Okay, appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna just mark a few of these down. Before we continue, Law did tell us she is having too many computer issues. She will not be joining us, so she does send her love
Aw.
and wishes she could be here. She's like, the Tyler episode, he's back. Oh, and she's upset. But we love you, Law. We hope you have a great weekend, and do send us those videos of your thoughts, especially on The Substance. Although she hadn't seen The Fly either, so that's
We
gonna
I
were
be
would
gonna
have
have a
loved to hear her what
first-time
she had to
watch.
say. Oh my
No.
god, the first
Oh,
time? Really?
Yep.
Oh,
man,
Now-
that would have been
too
so
bad.
fun.
We'll get into it, but I think there's another person on the panel that hasn't seen The Fly either, but we won't reveal who that is yet. We'll get into it soon.
Okay.
So I did get to see another movie this week, but again, I'm on my like adventure. I'm on day 19 of seeing 365 films. I've watched 19 films, so I'm on track to hit the number still. I know it's early. But this week I got to watch The Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling and oh boy, how come
Emily
I
Blunt.
cannot? Thank you, Emily Blunt. My brain just stopped for a moment. I want to warn people about this movie, not because you shouldn't watch it. I think people should watch this movie, but you need to go into it with a very particular mindset of this movie is not going to be like your typical film. It absolutely knows that it's a movie, and it knows what it's a movie about, and it plays 100% into that. It's not as much about the Fall Guy TV show. They just kind of took the premise, and it's much more about kind of a love story, or I'm sorry, not a love story, but a love letter to cinema, but especially to the stuntman, right? So I felt like looking at it from that perspective made the movie really, really fun, and you can kind of watch how they break it all down, and there's a lot of little inside jokes for people that love film. But if you're not a film fanatic or a cinephile, as everybody on this panel is, you may not love this movie. You might just be like, well, that's just your typical action flick, when really it knows it's a typical action flick. That's why it's playing on those tropes. And I absolutely think that the charisma between Emily and Ryan is really, really good. She's actually, I've never found her like somebody that I'm like drawn to in film. Brian, of course,
Ryan
is
is going
obsessed with
to
Emily.
murder you.
Right? I know, but she's not bad. I'm not saying negative. I'm just saying it's never been like the way I feel about Emma Stone or Sandra Bullock, where I'm like, oh wow, I need more.
Yeah.
So she's fine. She does good in everything. But in this one, I was like, oh, Emily Emily Blunt. And that's a first for me. I've never felt that way. And I think it's just because she's showing another side of her acting. She's a very kind of fun-loving character in this movie. When she's usually much more serious or aggressive, right? So
watch Wild Target. She's great in Wild Target. She's hilarious. Yeah,
I'll remember that. But yeah, I in hindsight, as I break down this film, I think that the four of you would probably enjoy it. Just look at it from the perspective I threw it there. So
I really I almost totally forgot about all of the cool media that they did beforehand with the stunts, the stunt coordinators and the stunt doubles that they had on like the red carpets and the premiere events. I almost completely forgot about that until you started talking about it. And that's a really good thing to note, because I probably would never have gotten around to watching this until, I don't know, it's like I have to watch something. But now that you mentioned it, it's a love letter to the stunt teams. That kind of really piques my interest a lot more. I think there's a lot of crews that don't get the recognition they deserve. I mean, we talk about horror and in award seasons, especially, never getting the recognition. I'm sure we'll touch on one of them soon, but never getting the recognition. And it's the same that goes for action films and stunt coordinators. And I see them making better moves towards that with this like new, what is it, the box office? What did they call that award?
Like the fan favorite award, basically? Like
no, the like the box office achievement award or whatever. Yeah. Where they're talking about like, films like Marvel and stuff getting some recognition because they bust the box offices wide open, and that's kind of like an olive branch, but it feels more like an olive twig. I mean, it's not quite
just an olive. Like here's an olive. Right?
It's a participation.
Here's an olive branch leaf. It's just a leaf.
Right.
It's genre films, my friends. They
maybe
say
some
genre
olive
film,
like the leftover juice in the jar.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you just see a lot of action films and horror films get relegated to like the comedy and musical categories, and I think that's a really interesting take on it, and maybe that'll see some movement when a film does well. But I don't know if Fall Guy really did that. Do you think it did it well enough?
No, it didn't.
It didn't do that well because people didn't know what they were watching. They didn't see. You're looking at a poster and you're like, oh, it's a movie about those two just doing whatever. There's not much you can get out of it. So if you didn't see a preview, and even the previews didn't do this movie any justice, it just made it look like it was the Fall Guy TV show. And really, honestly, at its core, it is about a stunt guy who has to go off the normal stunt guy stuff and deal with like real life shit. But that's there it is. That's the entire plot of the film. But that's not the plot of the film, in my opinion. Like that's just the substructure that the plot sits on. But that's just me.
So maybe those stunts that they did for promoting the film didn't quite have the narrative or substance they needed to really get that message out.
Yeah, it was
Do
like
stay
the
on the
stunts
credits
came
though.
first.
Watch the credits.
Yeah, the stunts guy came first, and then they framed a story around it because they wanted to showcase the stunts and the stunt people.
Which I think they did a good job. I don't think you need the most profound scriptwriter to do that. I think,
that's why what he does with John Wick, like literally John Wick movies are made with the stunts kind of being the star of the show and the story kind of being secondary.
Keanu has been working 6 months on these moves. Get it done, right? I'm sorry. So that said, we are going to move straight into the movies tonight because we did have quite a few Reel Roundups, so we don't want to, take up too much of your time, but we do want to give you plenty of movie fun to talk about. So we're going to move right into our movies. The first movie is The Fly, 1986. Like I said, this is David Cronenberg. And by the way, he does play the delivery doctor for the weird little, maggot thing, which is always great to see in it. But we're going to go into one. Justine is the one that picked The Fly, and we're going to ask her why and get her review. Let me just break this down for both Justine and Emma real quick. You give just like a little synopsis of how you feel about the film. Then we'll ask everybody that, and then we can open up the floor and just kind of generally talk about the film. At the end, we'll rate the film on a scale of 1 to 10 that you determine what that scale is. Everybody's 1 to 10 is their own, not for us to influence in any way. Well, that's not true. We do try to influence each other a little bit in the way we kind of, we've pushed each other to better ratings, I think. That's happened. Anyway, I digress. Justine, tell us about The Fly.
So The Fly, this was a pick just because we kind of connived together. Me and Emma were talking about what movies we wanted to pick. We like to have a little theme, you know. So we were talking about like a new year, new you. So we wanted something more like body horror, transformative. The Substance is so hot right now, and well deserved. And when I watched The Substance, I thought of The Fly the entire time. How we have Seth Brundle, who is a man with ambition, career ambition for himself to change the world with his technology. And the cost of that ambition, that blind ambition, just to trudge forward with no stops or obstacles allowed. And also you have, Gina Davis and Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum together on a film when they were together in real life. So this is obviously a love story too. So you can't hide the sexual and romantic tension between those two in every scene, to the point where it's almost an unbelievable romance. It's also a real interesting show of the time, like when this film was made and the way women were treated, and again, very relevant to The Substance and to, today. And that's just interesting how far we've come.
How far we've roller coastered, maybe, would be the
yeah.
way to
And
put that.
it seems to me like this is not just a story about Jeff Goldblum's character, but it's also a story about Gina Davis's character, from her perspective, when to cut the wound, basically, like cut it off, like be done. Like walk away from this toxic man and this toxic relationship. And obviously it's a little bit more physical than just a breakup.
Yeah.
So,
I like that. It's just a
and there's
breakup
some
story. It's a
bodily
rom-com,
autonomy
really.
talk in this whole film. There's a lot of
Yes.
bodily autonomy discussions happening, not just with her. You mentioned it earlier, the birthing scene, but there's also the forced transformation he tries to do with her, like putting her into his pod. And so there's a lot about bodily autonomy and self. So
All right. I like it.
yeah.
Emma, can you tell us what you think about The Fly?
I love The Fly. I love especially Brundlefly. I get really into it when it's Brundlefly. So anyway, I agree with everything Justine said. It's an interesting story about, he's not, unlike The Substance, he's not obsessed with getting recognition. He's obsessed with science and getting to be able to just transport one person and then perfectly, cell to cell, atom to atom, move a living being to another position. We can be like Captain Kirk and Spock and be cool and be buddies. Him and the baboon, maybe. But so it's like this interesting idea of being able to replicate a living being from one spot to another without flaw. And then it's through Gina Davis's character, as y'all were mentioning, with her worried about being pregnant with Jeff Goldblum's baby, and when he was already not correct because the transformation had not gone right, and her worrying about this being a baby that might not come out okay, and she doesn't want to have a baby, obviously. And then it gets a little complicated with her ex-boyfriend. I think they should have chosen a friend character to step in, because he's like such a jerk.
Oh yeah,
and like
he's an asshole.
and steps over her boundaries, and then he's the one that kind of helps her at the end. That's the only part of the film I'm like, can't she have a female friend or even a male, any kind of friend that or her mother, anybody? But that's such a small thing. But mostly this film is about death, and it's inescapable for Gina Davis. Not only is it about her bodily autonomy, as Justine mentioned, when he's trying to get her to join Brundlefly, when he's gone completely crazy, is she's losing someone. I know it's a movie, so we have to believe in the movie magic. She's fallen in love with him. and losing somebody you love so quickly and watching them become another person, because the things he does after the incorrect transformation with the fly are not really who he is. It's like you can compare it with mental illness, you can compare it with, you know, mental health going wrong when your physical health is going wrong, and she's losing somebody she loves and also worrying about her bodily autonomy, which is, she's a lot more on Gina Davis. And I think Gina Davis is what makes the film the most, because you can just see the emotion in her eyes. She doesn't have to say much to make us feel. But at the same time, it's also dealing, I know Cronenberg, a lot of the times this movie's been associated with the AIDS crisis, especially the time it came out. And that totally checks out. Very good analogy. I know that Cronenberg intentionally made it about cancer, because his mother died very slowly of cancer. So, but basically you can kind of attribute it to any disease that slowly degrades you, even mentally. You're just not the same person you used to be. And, you know, and personally, you know, I've had a very, you know, in the past of a loved one, die of Alzheimer's, and so I relate to that very much with this film as well. So I think it's a beautifully done film, and I think it as a science fiction film, it's genius. It kind of transcends its time in a lot of ways. Even the message with Gina Davis, it could have been better, because like, why her ex-boyfriend, who was like such a jerk, crossing boundaries before. But I love this film, and I love Brenda Fly.
I love that. Tyler, tell us what you think about The Fly. And was this your first time seeing it, or had you seen this one before?
No, I've seen this one before. I remember I mentioned on the podcast before that I watched Alien when I was 7, and during the same year, my dad also showed me The Fly, and probably not the best movie to show to someone who's like under 10 years old, not even a teenager yet, but whatever. I mean, at the time it was horrifying, but I love this movie. Yeah, like you guys were saying too, it's really like it's a romance at the end of the day too, and it's sort of it's tragic. I did not read. I watched a video on someone breaking down how it also is sort of like um the effects someone who has like a lot of like, who's really like consumed by their work. I really thought of like other, not science fiction movies, but like Whiplash, or even like The Substance in a way. Like when you're really consumed by a certain thing, it starts to take a toll on you mentally, physically, the way that you treat people around you.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Until it becomes like, yeah, you know, by the end of the movie, it becomes like completely manifested into like someone who's completely not themselves anymore. And I do remember specifically how like traumatizing the end was, because I think that's like one of the first horror movies where I, like, as a 7-year-old, by the way, like I'm trying to connect, like I really connected with, like, I felt bad for, you know, Jeff Goldblum's character, right? And that whole scene where like he's like taking the shotgun. I'm like, oh my god, no, he's gonna like swing at her or something. Like he puts it up to his head, and you're like, oh, he just wants mercy. It's a mercy kill. It's like, oh, and it's like, you're asking Gina Davis to do this. You gonna ask her to do this too after every like, yeah, and I remember that it like ended like that, and there was no like sort of like after credits or anything to sort of like some kind of closure, right? You're kind of like left with that.
Just
at
left
the end
with
of the movie.
that,
It's very like bleak.
It's how it
And
begins
I think,
too. It's like it's a hard beginning
Right.
and a hard end, right? It
Yeah,
does
we just
both.
jump right into this conversation with these two people. Yeah.
Right.
We're so spoiled with after credit scenes nowadays. I
Right,
swear.
Yeah.
Like
When do
I'm
you-
always looking for them, and if this one had it, it would be her like not getting an abortion or something.
Right.
Well, if you
and,
know,
like,
there's a
very
second
similar to
movie,
Slice.
so there's more to the story, unfortunately.
Right. The second movie is the after credits that I wish we didn't get. Like I think,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, no. And if
I
you've
like
seen
the
it,
bleak ending.
it's
When do you all feel after credits started? I feel like it started with Marvel films. Is that correct?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off had an after credit scene that is quite referenced. Deadpool references it directly by doing the same scene. So I would even argue that it probably happened before that, but that's the first one I remember, and that's what, 87, 80 somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So
I think Marvel
Oh.
definitely popularized them and cemented them as
Mhm.
almost
Yeah,
a
a lot
necessity.
of a lot of comedies I think were doing stuff like that. Like, didn't Caddyshack have a thing with the gopher or
the
whatever at the
gopher at the
end?
end, yeah, I'm almost certain you're right, which
Do you
would
remember the
predate Ferris
blooper
Bueller's.
reels?
So
The blooper reels were my favorite. In all comedies, like, it was, like, required that they have blooper reels, and
In the
they don't do
credits.
that anymore.
Mhm.
they
Yeah, and I
don't do
want
them
more
for
blooper
Pixar either,
reels.
okay? And I'm angry that there aren't Pixar blooper reels. Okay, what did they just get lazy and just stop making them? That's just
Yeah.
I
I think the animators are just really overworked and not paid well.
that is a fair point, and I take back my previous statement. Pay them more so we can get our blooper reels back. That's what I'm saying.
I think,
Janine, what
like,
did you think of The Fly?
So I am the one who had never seen it before. It was me. It was me. No, I really enjoyed this film. I am a sucker for a romantic plot point. So I liked that this was illustrated almost like a Beauty and the Beast type thing, or like, a King Kong and the Lady type thing. So that was kind of a fun comparison my brain was making. And I kind of went down a really interesting way of thinking in watching this kind of side by side with The Substance, in that, like, this story is very common, an overambitious scientist, does something wrong, pushing the boundaries and, to his own detriment. But in kind of watching it with The Substance, I was asking myself what would actually be scarier, going through this type of crazy body change, not understanding it like The Substance, or being fully aware of what's happening to you, like in The Fly.
And he
So
could
I
predict
found
it too. Like he was kind of
exactly,
predicting
like
what's
he
happening.
knows every beat of what's going to happen to him. He knows why it's happening. So is that scarier, kind of knowing your fate, or is it scarier the unknowing of what's happening to you when this other person's using your body and all of this kind of thing?
Yeah.
So yeah, I really liked that I was kind of coming up with these really interesting questions with the film. Obviously the body horror looked insane, so I wasn't expecting anything less from that. But yeah, I loved their chemistry. I liked kind of this underlying romance in what is an insane premise for a film. All of that worked really well. And yeah, I do kind of like the bleak ending. It just kind of ends and we're just left with like, what the
How
fuck
do you
just
feel about
happened?
this,
Yes.
right? You have to
And
just
and
be
I'm
with
and
the
I'm
community
okay
feels.
with that. Yeah, because everything in the film is pretty insane. So why not end it just the same?
Well, even the teamer scenes, with him, even at the when I put the promo up of him in the coffee bar with her, just talking about his discovery, he's unhinged even then, which is great. Jeff Goldblum should have won more awards throughout his career. This performance as Brundlefly is phenomenal. The twitching and the just all of the visceral
The thing's
body
falling
movements
apart.
that he
How
did,
he's just
right?
explaining like the liquefying of his food just so
Well,
casually, like
Well, Jeff
I
is
love
so
the
good
scene,
at
right?
that
Where
manic
he
delivery.
throws up on the donut and goes, "Oh, that's gross." Right? Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Obviously you forgot that we're humans and we don't want to see you eat like that. For
Can
me,
I
this
share
is actually
something
this.
personal?
Sure.
Okay, so one of the best compliments I ever gotten is from Justine, and I don't think I've told you this. So when you see a message but you don't see the whole message, and you before you click on it, and I don't know if it was Instagram or whatever, and I see Justine saying, "You are my Jeff Goldblum." I'm like, fuck yeah, I am. I didn't even know what she was talking about. I didn't know what she was
Still,
sending me, and
without
it was
context, it already sounds
no
like the sweetest
context, and I'm
thing.
like, ooh.
It's true.
Yes, I
It's
am.
true.
But it was just it was a video of him saying mentioning the bitter tears of Petra von Kant, and which I've mentioned before. Because
was it his Letterboxd top 4 or whatever?
Yeah, it was. But it was just like that line. I'm like, I am your Jeff Goldblum.
I love that.
Sorry.
And I know I can see that. I can see it. Quirky is a word that I would use in a very positive way to describe you, Emma, and I would definitely say that fits.
So Jeff Goldblum has this way of like having a very energetic delivery to anything that he does, while still bringing it down into like suave. Like,
Right.
Yes.
Even as
You've got,
Brundlefly,
like,
he's like
the
checking his
waves,
get,
tie,
like,
right?
you
You
can
know?
waves
see
of
he's really
him.
excitable, but
Yeah.
then he changes his
Calms it
cadence
down.
partway through, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden he's like suave, and you're like, what
Right.
what just
Him leaning in a
happened to me?
doorway.
I
Just
know,
But
right?
he
Because
is
it's like, you're gonna let
frightening.
me pick the color of
Yeah.
the road, Jeff? Oh my
He's
god.
We'll
both
hold you
frightening
around.
and also sexy, which is a weird to be afraid of, to be drawn to what you're afraid of is a very unique blend.
That's
Because
what all my
it makes
exes
you,
have said.
Oh, God.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
But when you have
there-
someone who can deliver that like that like man, that's what I mean by there's nobody better, I think, that could have delivered a manic scientist just going off the hinges than Jeff Goldblum in a way that still makes us care about that character.
Yeah.
Because he was doing horrendous stuff almost immediately.
right.
And
I
And
would have
we
been
were
still
done when he was
like,
having
back and
sex with that
checking
other
on him.
woman.
Yes, and she was
okay,
still
Yeah.
about
I'm
him.
out.
The other woman
I'm out.
would have done it.
But also behind the scenes, the baboon was a lot of trouble, and the
I
only
bet.
person that was able to dominate the baboon was Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, they were so buddy. Like they were.
I'm
He
surprised to
was out of
see
the
an
plot.
actor with the baboon in arms, like considering how violent they can be. I was kind of
Yeah.
surprised to
It
see
was
that.
the
Like,
cutest scene.
I absolutely, I really, really love the moment where Brundlefly starts talking about insect politics, and I really
Oh,
love
yeah.
how he basically, in a very poetic way, describes how I will just destroy everyone around me if they're near me, because we don't believe in politics, and it's that moment where he feels himself slipping away.
Yeah.
Which isn't completely true, because even in the end, when he's like, what like Tyler was talking about, he's like, kill me.
Yeah, but or even
like,
when he asks her to keep the baby because he feels like that's the
Right.
last
Right.
stitch of humanity left of
Mhm.
him. So
Right.
to have that kind of deep of awareness in the stage he's at, speaks to like how brilliant he is and how he's still in there, even to kind of that deep degree of his breakdown.
Right. No, I did see this in the 80s. I was probably a bit too young, maybe 12, 13 when I saw it. And the scene that I still remember to this day is actually the bar scene where he goes out to do the arm wrestling scene, and
yeah.
just like the sweat and the goo and the like. It's
Yeah.
such it's a gooey movie, if you will. There's a lot of slime, there's not a lot of blood. It's mostly like pus and
Yes,
other gross things.
Yum.
But the like part that threw me is when he was like digging into the guy's hand and you could see the like liquid
Goo.
coming out of his hand. I was
Yeah.
just like, is that coming from Brundlefly? Is that coming from the guy? Yeah, that scene has always stuck with me. It's one I remember. It's part of why I like horror is The Fly, because I was young enough to see this, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and a few others that really just made me go, okay, horror is one of my top genres. Gina Davis does deserve a lot of credit in this role, because it is apparent, like Janine was talking about, when you see her voice in that scene at the end where she's like, no, and she's like, nobody I think could even replicate that. That's why this movie hasn't had a remake since then. I don't think you could do better. I think the bar is too high here for this film, but that's just me. Anyway, I want to open it back up to the floor and see if you guys have more thoughts on The Fly.
I will always take a opportunity to talk about Gina Davis because she is a woman of women. Like, when it comes to her career, her choices, the characters she inspired me since I was very young, with even films that are, I guess, recognized as being terrible, which I disagree wholeheartedly, like Cutthroat Island. As
No
Captain
movie's
Morgan,
terrible.
she, like, I don't know, there's something about how she manages to be so human and connected to every character, and believable. And like I said, they're actually together while filming this film. Like, her and Jeff Goldblum were dating at the time. I don't think married. I don't remember exactly. But even without that, I would believe her pain. And the moments where she's in the doctor's office with her ex and ex-boss, I guess, looking out the window, it's still giving. Like,
Yes,
she's
like you can't
got
even see
her
her
back
face.
to us,
Yeah.
and
And
it's
them just
still
not
giving.
listening to her. She's
Right.
selling her pain and her frustration.
Why
And
her
she
ex
has to
be
keep
there.
saying it. She has to keep saying it over and over again what she wants. And they just keep making all these excuses. And yeah, she's
Mhm.
definitely selling her emotion, even when we can't see her face.
right?
Like,
Which is
she's
unique.
just
Like,
incredible.
is that shoulder acting? Is that what we're gonna call that?
I
Sorry,
think it's
we
a
were talking about eyebrow acting the
stoicism.
last couple of
Like, there's a
Shacking.
stoicism that she has that when she turns around, you know already the feelings because
Yeah.
and yeah, that's partly with the support of the other cast and the dialogue that's
Mhm.
happening, but it's because of all of the delivery that led up to that moment and all of what you're gonna feel right after that moment that really just kind of wrap it all together into this character that doesn't take shit from people around her, but at the
Mhm.
same time never loses her empathy along the way.
Yeah.
And
I'd
that
say it
is
grows
so
even.
hard.
Her
Yeah,
empathy
oh,
grows even harder
constantly.
because she sees trauma that most people will never experience. Watching your boyfriend's face melt off into a fly I think that would screw anybody up.
Oh yeah.
It makes sense why
And she
she's not
still
in the
couldn't
sequel.
kill him. Like, she
I
still
know.
didn't want to do
Yeah.
it. Like,
I feel
I
like
don't
we
know.
feel more for Brundlefly because of her. Without her
Mhm.
lens, we wouldn't. We
Mhm.
care. We feel a little bit, but not as much without Gina Davis's character.
That's a
Yeah.
very good point. That's a
so
very good
with
point.
that, could you see the roles reversed and the film be any bit believable where a woman was being turned into some monster and a man stuck by her side till the end?
I have one word: crazy. It'd be
I'm not saying it would be impossible, but it
crazy.
would have some amount of suspending your
Too
disbelief, right?
emotional, making too much of a deal out of something,
Right.
Yeah. Just
and not.
destroy it because
Yep, all of that. It's like, why don't you just go take a walk it off or something like that?
Would you like some pills? It'll make it better, I promise. Right?
No,
You'll
but
have
This
that
is
you-
down.
too hard. I'm gonna have to go. I'm sorry.
Can you call one of your girlfriends and see if she'll help you
Right?
out? Right?
Are there guys that are good that would be a male equivalent to Gina Davis? Absolutely. But I mean, thinking in
Ooh.
general, oof, that's a bigger gamble. That's a bigger gamble because I think people that are women, people that are femme presenting, um, anybody. I'm sorry, it's not against cis males. I'm sorry, but anybody that has lived a different experience than being cis and male it's just there's a bigger empathy that tends to exist, and it's just kind of natural, and it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that cis males are bad. I'm not saying that. But I mean, thinking, okay, it's a bigger gamble for there to be a Gina Davis male character to the scientist. But I think there are certainly a lot of men, really good ones, that
Yeah.
would be that.
What's coming to mind for me is Splash, like maybe Tom Hanks.
Scream.
Oh yeah, Tom
Yeah.
Hanks. Tom
That's
Hanks.
a good
When he turns
example.
into a mermaid, like they are immediately dragging her and testing her and poking and prodding her, and he, is going through all this to try to save her. So
She's still beautiful though, and a
yeah,
mermaid.
yeah, she's like a
I mean,
gorgeous
she's half
creature.
fish, so I
But
don't
she
know.
still gets treated terribly when she
Right.
turns back into a mermaid in front of everybody.
The
Right.
only
Kim
one I can think of is
Cattrall,
But then
Frozen.
he also isn't he really terrible to her too when he finds
It's
out
been
she's
a
a
while.
mermaid? Yeah,
It's
I
been a
think
while.
It's
I
been
think
a
he
while for
actually
me
is
too.
really terrible to her when he finds out she's a mermaid at first.
Have you seen
Yeah.
Spring? The one with it's more Lovecraftian, but she turns into a monster. It turns out she's like a really old monster. It's very like cosmic horror, but it's a love
Okay.
story, and it is phenomenal. And this is the only one I can think of where the male character sticks with her in spite of the fact that she could become a monster and eat him. And I just don't see it a lot, and it leads me
Yeah,
back to like the
that's a really good point.
statistics around
Yeah.
when women get sick, terminally ill, how many of their men counterparts leave them, how much of it results in divorce,
Oh yeah.
where the opposite is completely the opposite, where women will
Normalized, right?
stick through men through terminal illness all the
Yeah.
way to the end, and then some. And it's just, I don't know. It that's I'm done with the
No,
downer
it's
talk.
an interesting switch to thinking.
No,
for
you're
sure.
good. Any other thoughts, Tyler? I wanted to see if you had any other thoughts.
I
Putting you
guess
on
just
the
some fun
spot.
facts. I didn't know Howard Shore did the music So
Oh.
the guy who did the Lord of the Rings, that's weird, right? Like,
Also,
That's
That
a
one
big
too.
jump. Yeah.
produced by Mel Brooks, but he wanted to keep his name off of it. Just throwing that out there,
Eraserhead
Yep.
also.
right?
Well, not
So-
produced,
yeah.
but he launched David Lynch. Rest in peace. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. There was one other thing about Jeff Goldblum's performance that stuck out to me this time because I don't know why I watch Jurassic Park like way too often. I've seen it thousands of times. And there's the moment where he says, "You're afraid to dive into the plasma pool, aren't you? You're afraid to destroy and recreate, aren't you? I'll bet you think you woke me up about the flesh, don't you?" And she goes on and on about this, about penetration and penetrating the flesh. And then I think to Ian Malcolm, who talks about how discovery is a penetrative act. And I'm like, this is like the opposite of Ian
Yeah.
Malcolm. And they're very, like, they're both
Get them
suave
in a
and they're
room
both
together.
like great with a shirt off, but they would not agree with each other, right? They would argue
Yes.
back and forth. And of course, Ian Malcolm from the book, that's not, we don't need to go into that guy. That's a different character altogether. But I like how Goldblum, it almost feels like Spielberg was like, you're a scary guy from The Fly, so we need to lighten you up a little bit in this movie. So let's
I
have you
love
say
that.
things
I
that are
love
the
that.
opposite, right? And
Yeah.
that's just that's my headcanon. That
And then
probably
do
never
like
happened.
a very like oh my god, what's that movie with Kevin Bacon? Where he saves
Footloose.
Footloose. Have a Footloose.
Oh, really?
gymnastics apartment
Hollow Man?
scene.
That's like Hollow Man. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Right?
No, Footloose. She got it. It's Footloose.
It was a joke, but I got it.
The whole Jeff Goldblum scene where he's doing like gymnastics in his apartment and like
Oh yes.
all
That's
I could
very much
think of
your
was
house.
Footloose.
Footloose. Never.
And how I want to put those sounds on top of it so bad just to see if it still vibes.
I like
So he can
she's
play
a
the-
maniac, you know? She's a maniac from
Right.
Flashdance.
That's what I was thinking. I was literally thinking that, Emma. That's hilarious.
Right on.
So
He
funny.
can of course do piano, which of course I hate you, Jeff, for the fact that you just sat down and played piano, no problem. But then he can't do the gymnastics. Couldn't they find an actor that could do? I'm sorry, I digress. I'm just kidding. That's
He
me,
still
Do
looks
it
good
all.
doing it.
right?
When he stands up in his kitchen, and this is my part where I'll get to objectify Jeff Goldblum. So give me 1 second. When he stands up in that kitchen and he's all sweaty and he's shirtless, and that's better than the Jurassic Park on the table wounded
Interesting.
scene.
Even
Way
with the mullet,
better.
like he's
It's a
got
little
the
more
full
real.
80s
Oh, yeah.
mullet.
Oh,
Okay.
I don't care
Yeah,
about
no, his
mullet.
hair
Mullets
game
are
is
nice.
better. in
Look,
Jurassic
mullets can
Park,
be
but-
hot. It just
Right.
depends. It has to be framed well within the person.
It can't be like
The way-
nothing on top with long in the back.
No,
It
it's not
might be-
about the mullet itself. It's about the
Oh.
person attached to the mullet. It's the
Oh,
attitude. It's the attitude.
Interesting. So a mullet could be bad, but still be good if it had the right person underneath it.
Yeah.
You gotta
Okay.
carry the mullet and not let the mullet carry you.
Mm.
No, and not being a guy like, hey, look, I'm wearing this like old, ugly mullet. That's not attractive. If you're just like, this is
No.
my hair.
That's a
Like, you
good
don't even
point. There
think
are
of
certain
it.
things you just
Jeff
have to like, pull
Goldblum
it
doesn't
off.
do
Right.
things to be attractive. He just is.
He just
is.
exudes it.
Now, do you
The
guys? Okay,
Goldblum
this is not
effect.
about The Fly, but it's just about Jeff Goldblum. Do you think that like some actors, he now hams it up a little bit more? Like he really lays on the bloom
Yeah,
of
that's
the
a good
Goldblum,
question.
That just
right?
happens with old age, I think. Like,
And
my
now that, like,
mom
he's
used
been
to
made aware
love
of,
the
like,
color
his-
pink. Now it's
yeah.
her whole personality.
Right.
I actually was thinking. I actually asked somebody recently, not just Jeff Goldblum, it was Jeff Goldblum and also Willem Dafoe, and they're both great actors that can achieve a lot. But some films they're hired to be okay. We need a Willem Dafoe, or we need a Jeff Goldblum. I do think they always, because they consider their craft important, maybe less so with age, they're a little less serious about it, but I do think they do put effort every time. Like, it might not be like when they were younger and they had to prove themselves, but I do think that I don't know either of them, obviously. But give them a
Be
call.
like, why are they not on the show, Emma? Come on.
No.
like, you
Well,
know
then
Jeff,
I would have
like,
brought
give him a
them with
call.
me.
Right.
I would have brought, or I'd be too busy hanging out with Jeff Goldblum. You know,
Right. You'd be like, I don't have time for your show. I'm hanging out with Goldblum.
No, that wouldn't be true. I always have time for you guys. Anyway, I do think that they always put effort in even when they know they're being hired to be Jeff Goldblum or Willem Dafoe. And there's other actors, I'm sure, that, you know.
Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage is actually he's an entirely different animal. I have to say. I do, you know, sometimes it's tax season. And that depends on his role. I mean,
And
he's
when he's just gotten a gold-plated dinosaur head that he has to pay for. Yeah, we got a couple.
So
Or he
I
buys
think
the
Nicolas
original Superman
Cage is
comic or
on his
something.
own different level. Hail Satan! You know,
I kind of agree with you. I don't know. Big Daddy always stands out in my head as a character that I always hear. Now switch to the kryptonite. I just love that. I can't stop it. Yeah, there's only one actor that I think stopped trying when he got older, and that was Marlon Brando. He just quit acting and just started reading as he got older. Whatever. I digress.
He had hearing issues as well, and
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. We did the Island of Dr. Moreau, and we did a deep dive, and I watched the entire documentary, and it's oh boy, that's a whole nother. You can go check out that episode of The Real Study.
Oh my god, and that's Stanley, the director. Oh, that's an interesting documentary. I love it.
It really is.
I have to go watch your episode now because I love that documentary.
It's good, and I
love
bring
Hardware.
it up quite a bit. So
I love Hardware, and I love Colorado Space, but you know, there's a lot of things to it.
My friend was in that movie.
Really?
In Colorado Space?
Mm-hmm. Such a beautiful movie. Also,
Brendan Meyer.
also gross, but beautiful.
Oh, that's weird. All right. We do have another movie that my producer said, hey, you have to worry about time. So I do want to make sure we worry about time. By the way, if you don't know our producer, her name is Aina, and she is, of course, also on all social media. Please go follow her. She does an amazing job to put this show together for all of us. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Aina.
Also want to put Keys, cell phone wallet, and Keys needs a shout out as well. He's the voice of The Real Study, and he's who you hear doing all of our promos. And of course, the intro. That said, we're going to rate The Fly and move into the substance because I think this is going to be a discussion. So why don't we go in the same order? Justine, again, 1 through 10, your choice of where you rate The Fly.
Oh, through 10. Oh man. I would give it 8.5 stars for The Fly out of 10. I just my main issues with The Fly are specifically around the extra characters and how much power Gina Davis's character allows them. Her ex has no reason or business to be involved in anything for her anymore after the way he treated her. And I find it so strange that that's where she would run to. He provides zero safety. So I find that as a woman, a glaring like plot hole. Like there's no way. Like she's not someone who stands for abuse or anything like that. She does leave situations where she's being mistreated. So to see her go back and put herself into a situation where she knows the outcome will not be in her favor is odd. So that's the only thing I can say I don't like about this movie. But it gives us a nice person to watch melt later. So
I like that.
8.5 stars.
8.5. Love it. Emma, what do you rate The Fly?
Okay, so I only this is a standard I only hold for myself, not other people, and that is that I don't rate movies. For me, in my internal body and being, I find it reductive. It's a movie I really love and adore.
All right. We will have a no. We will just put a little strike right there. No problem. Everybody has a right to their own reviews and how they do them. We totally respect
I believe that as well. It's just within me. I just my blood, my stomach hurts.
No, that's fair. That's fair. It is hard. It is unfair of us to a degree to judge art, but it's more just like where do we fall on the scale of how do we feel about it?
And I'm cool with that.
I approach it. You'll find me rate a whole bunch of things 10s that people are like, why is that a 10? I'm like, because I'll watch it 20 times. That's why
I rate everything high.
So yeah, I rate everything high, or if I don't, it's a terribly low score. I'm terrible like that. Tyler, what do you rate The Fly?
I just want to say, have you guys seen my letterbox? Everything's like a 5 to me. I don't know, just everything 10, whatever. Like, I don't know. I really like. I think this movie has had an impact on me when I was a kid. So like, a little bit of bias, but I'm gonna say like a 9. I love the special effects. I have the same issues that you guys have. That X character, it takes me out of the movie sometimes. To quote Janine, that guy makes me go, ugh. That guy.
Ooh.
Ugh. But yeah,
Love
I'm
it.
gonna say 9. The Fly was Fly.
Fly was fly. We've missed these.
Yeah.
We've missed these. All right, Janine, what do you rate The Fly as a first-time viewer?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely lived up to all the body horror that I was fully aware of. So that was really great to see. Agree with the points about the boyfriend character. I think obviously her sympathy for Seth makes sense that she would go back and care and check on him and make sure he's okay. But the boyfriend kind of coming in and being her like little sidekick through all of this was really obnoxious. And even when she is, solidifies herself as a very self-aware, determined character and separates from Seth, she only gets back into it because he like kidnaps her and back into it. So to kind of backtrack on that with this other stupid guy character, that's kind of the one knock I also had about the film. So I would agree with Justine and give it 8.5.
Now, I'm not going to defend the character because I 100% agree. I hate him right out the gate. He steals her key, and I'll keep it in case.
I'll keep it.
what
Oh
the
yeah, that
fuck,
pissed me
dude?
off.
Like, no.
And that
But
actor generally is always an asshole in things.
he is.
so-
But to me, okay, I
You'll
will
keep
defend.
the key, and I will key your car.
Right. I will defend the characters that play the biggest assholes because generally speaking, they're doing a phenomenal job because they're
Very
making
true.
us feel all those
Very
feelings. So
true.
I also find that most of the worst people in film are some of the nicest people in reality,
Yeah.
which I
100%.
love. But I do love that we get a redemption in a sense where we get to see what a dick he is for so much, and then we get to watch him get his hand and his leg melted off, which I was like,
Yes.
all right, this
Sweet.
is karma, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. I rate this an 8, and I think it's mostly because I feel like Cronenberg could have put 10 more minutes into Jeff and Gina's relationship so that we could
Mhm.
feel that love even more at the end. Not that we don't. I think they do a phenomenal job, or Gina
Yeah,
does.
no,
But I
agree.
feel like there could have been a little more,
Mhm.
even a montage, right, to show how much they spend time
The
together.
time they're spending together. Yeah.
Right, something.
Mhm.
But I just don't think Cronenberg's the montage kind of guy. So I assume that's why we never got one. But yeah, I rated an 8. I rated an 8 on Letterboxd when I posted it, but I stay at solidly at an 8. So, all right, that is The
Without
Fly.
their chemistry, it would not have been sold.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
That's
just
very true.
sex appeal coming right off the screen.
Right. Even with those hairs in the scene, but there's something to be said about sex and horror. And speaking
I
of
get
which,
one of
we are
those
about
right
to get
here once in a while.
the little hairs.
A little
I get one
Brundle
right here on
fly
my
hair.
head. I get a Brundle fly hair right there. It's really annoying.
Fly hair, bro.
That's what they are. I don't know what else to call them. My wife tries to cut these and they just won't go away. So
All our as somebody that does a lot of beauty retouching, all of our faces have way more hair than we even know. Like when I look in the mirror, I don't see any, and when I get close up to touch up skin, wow, it's like I have a beard. But I can't even see it until you get close up.
my ears have beards. I just wanted to know.
Oh, that's cute though. I like
Your
that.
beard.
It is until those
Great
long ones
segue
start
to
coming
talk
out.
Oh,
about
but
Like,
Mr.
I'm like a
Bits, it could be a
70-year-old.
whole thing.
Yeah, no. Yeah, fuzzy ears McGee. I'm not into that.
Fuzzy
so-
ears, Mr. Bits.
Well, sorry, fuzzy-eared bits. That said, we're going to move on to the other horror movie that we're talking about this evening, and that is, of course, The Substance. This movie stars Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, who has been really skyrocketing and doing a ton of movies lately. I think we'll see more from her. This is body horror to the extreme, I would argue. So Emma, you picked The Substance. Tell me
Yes, I
why
did.
you picked The Substance and what you think about it.
Oh, what do I think about The Substance?
Yeah. Why you
Well-
picked it and what you think.
Why I picked it is it's definitely now, which admittedly there are many of my favorite films, but this is one of my favorite films now, absolutely. And it's interesting that since I've listened to a lot of conversations from people on the film, from people that are just like me, this film is summed up in the way every drag show episode ends, where RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love somebody else? Really. And so there's a lot of discourse about the consciousness and the importance that Sue is to Elizabeth, even though they are one, which we know. The idea is that, so they took out a lot. I watched an interview with Colleen Fargo, and she said, I cut out a lot of the parts that made it a little more obvious. So there is a scene where that is cut out where Sue goes to the doorman to let her in the studio, and he's like, I can't let you in, at least not without ID. And she's like, oh, but if I go into my purse and I get my ID out, there's a wind today, and you know what might happen, I'm wearing a short skirt. And he's like, okay, kid, go on in. And then later on, when Elizabeth, Demi Moore's character, is trying to get into the studio and he doesn't let her in, she's like, I guess there wasn't a wind today. So so they do share the
Some
same
awareness.
Yeah, they do share the same consciousness, which brought immediately, when she said that, brought into mind the image of there being two egg yolks, but within the same egg white. And this is a film that's very much all the messaging, everything that's important is in the visuals, in the motifs, and I had complicated feelings about the third act when I first saw it, but it just actually is perfect. It's like we're overt. You know, our producer's name is Harvey. Overt, and then to just go to the extreme, which she said, you know, as much as she was inspired by David Lynch, she didn't mention Cronenberg, but I think Cronenberg always has some inspiration within body horror because of his importance in it, is that she went to the extreme of, I'm going to show you John Merrick. Basically, when she's like, I'm Sue, which means I'm Elizabeth. I'm the person that you loved. And instead of like, I am not an animal. And another thing that really kind of solidifies a lot of things with it, I wrote it down. The roses that Elizabeth received had a note when she was fired. Thank you for all these years with us. You were amazing. And then over until later on, when Elizabeth has become the old hag, like the true form of like the hunchback, basically before El Monstro Eliza Sue is when they're both combined. So it's like the preemptive. She's become the embodiment of everything they both hate, because they're the same person, hate about each other, the above becoming ugly, irrelevant, old. And that's why, you know, Sue just keeps on beating her senselessly to the point of it becomes a very long, uncomfortable scene. But, you know, I mean, if you make a younger, hotter version of yourself and you don't love yourself, which Demi Moore's character literally says when she's in this form, I don't love myself. You're the only part of me that's lovable. And we zoom to the card before she's about to try and terminate Sue, the younger version of herself. It goes to the card, break a leg, they are going to love you. And the film always kind of pinpoints the glittering of the globe, the spotlight. And we always see Sue and Elizabeth looking at the spotlight. So they're not even looking for a specific person's approval. They're looking from this like anonymous audience of approval. And we had to, so it's easier to put our place in. When I knew for Farjo that they say that share the same consciousness, because I'm like, if I can't experience being the younger, hotter version, why would I do this? But they do share the same consciousness, and it just breaks my heart when Elizabeth says, you're the only part of me that's lovable, and it's just they're the same. It just has become old and you know, an ugly, you know, pretty much a monster, and the beautiful young. But basically, we don't know them as people. We don't know them as personalities, and we're not supposed to. You know, where it's just this ambition. So I think it's this instead of trying to change, it's like this trying not to change, because. And I liked that there was the guy that liked her from Fred. Grammar school. And sometimes I think that can happen with folks, is like, oh, well, I don't love myself, but this person thinks I'm on a pedestal, and they find some validation in that instead of finding validation within yourself. and
Yeah.
that you're like, no matter how old you are or what your place, there's a point in your life where you have to realize, I'm not going to convince anybody of me anymore. I'm just going to validate me, and everybody else, if they don't like me, that's fine. And so I loved this film, and I also love hags. So I've watched all the hagsploitation films of the 70s and the 60s. I love them. I think they kind of start with Sunset Boulevard with Gloria Swanson. And then the ultimate, of course, which is one of my favorite movies, which makes sense why I love The Substance so much, is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane with Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. And then it's interesting, within that time, Gloria Swanson, Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, and a lot of other women that were actresses that were used to be hot and young, they became typecast as hags.
Yeah.
And so there's so many 70s movies, especially like we think of like Who Slew Auntie Roo and all these films where they got typecast. So I'm kind of interested to see. I don't really happen the same way, but right now, The Substance is out. Baby Girl is out, which, Nicole Kidman's an older woman being seduced to a point or by a younger man. And then Pamela Anderson in The Last Showgirl, which I have not seen Baby Girl or The Last Showgirl, but it's interesting to see where these films might sprout with certain actresses' careers who, like, Demi Moore was so perfect to pick because the character's is just turned 50, but Demi Moore herself is in her 60s.
60s.
If I look like that in my 60s, damn,
Right?
like wow. So I want to open the floor to everybody else because there's so many amazing visuals. The only one thing I mention Fargeau was also inspired by trauma films, so I'm like, oh, that's so Poltergeist. Oh my god. And like the cheesiness of the former WWF, now they're WWE, like she wanted there to be a lot of cheese as well. She's kind of a very well-rounded person when it comes to the films she likes.
I like it. Janine, I want to go to you. What did you think of The Substance?
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved this film. I get what you're saying about the ending and how people might think it's a little over the top and crazy, but I actually had heard Coralie talk about her first film, Revenge, and the finale of that film is also incredibly bloody. Well, where that film sits more in reality, the ending was far more bloody than it would need to be in reality, because she wanted it to be heightened. She wanted it to have this fantastical sensibility. So when this movie ended with this high kind of gory situation and all that blood, I was taken back to what she had said about Revenge, wanting it to have this fantastical, over the top quality. And because she's dealing, I think, with such a real issue, it's kind of fun and interesting to frame it in this kind of wild premise. What I got from it as well was this concept of it's the responsibility of your younger self to take care of your older self, and it doesn't go the other way around. Which is why Sue can take so much away from Elizabeth and it doesn't go the other way. Because when we're younger, we can do all these terrible things to our bodies, and then the older self is the one who has to pay for it. So to illustrate it in this way, I found really interesting.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and like all the body horror, I found body horror in a lot of the elements, particularly with Dennis Quaid's character, all the sloppy close-ups of him eating and, his teeth and all of these things.
That was the grossest part to me.
Yes,
taking a
that
piss
in and of
and not
itself
washing your
was a
hands,
form.
just saying.
Yes, right? That in and of itself is a piece of body horror in my mind. So I liked that there were different kind of illustrations of body horror in this film. I mean, the bright, colorful world of Sue juxtaposed to Elizabeth's world, also just really interesting parallels. How they did it with like the billboard almost kind of staring down that big image of Elizabeth, and them these images of these two characters having this kind of face off with each other. So just a lot of smart things visually, and just a really fun and bright and cool and creative way to tackle something that really affects women so deeply.
Right. Tyler, what did you think of The Substance?
I wish I saw this movie in theaters, but I did have it was nice to see it at home. This is the first movie in a very long time where I was able to pause it. I literally was like smiling and laughing on the floor because it was just so much. Like I was like, oh my god, they're going all the way, huh? Like they're not gonna.
Yeah.
I think it was right when the whole like because once she injects the thing, right, you're like, I wonder how this is gonna look. Like I tried to avoid anything like trailers or any of that stuff, but like once she comes out of her spine and stuff, I was like, where am I? Like, what is this? What am I watching right now? Um, but I think a lot of why that sort of body horror was especially like I think it especially hits for people because in a weird way it's kind of like that's what we do to our bodies. Like it really is like
Hmm.
the extent that people will go to like look better, feel better, or base what they're doing off of trying to get external validation from people. I think is what you mentioned earlier too.
Mhm.
But yeah, and just like thinking back at like with the way TikTok is, or like a lot of the creators I've met, people will do things to again get external validation or you know maintain some sort of like legacy, or like that's the stuff that I like think about a lot. It's like, what am I gonna leave like when I leave here? Like
Mhm.
eventually, inevitably it's not that it's not gonna matter, but like you're gonna just go into this weird obscure like nothingness. Like there's nothing after
Yeah.
this, right? Like you're gonna be forgotten. um and I think that's why I love the ending so much. I think for everything that she goes through, like she's hating on herself. She's trying to get all again external validation from everybody. The ending when she looks up at the sky is like I saw a video where like it's the first and like final moment where she finally like accepts who she is and like really loves herself. Like she's like this weird like blob mess, but that I think
Blob,
that's like
yeah,
the
on her
most
star. Yeah.
her, right? And then she
With
just
a
fades
light ahead
into
on top of her, the light, the
Mhm.
light, the
so
spotlight.
beautiful, right?
And 3 beautiful
And the
palm trees.
sparkles
I
too.
thought that was
Yeah.
nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
very nice, especially since
Yeah.
it was all shot in France.
Right. Which is funny.
Oh, was it?
Yes, it was.
Justine.
But it felt like
That's
this surreal, unrealistic kind of version of LA.
Right.
Exactly, but in
Yeah.
the best way, in the very
Yeah.
intentional.
Yeah, it's very
Right.
cartoonish, which I loved.
Yeah.
Justine, tell us about the substance.
So something I really think that they did a good job with is balancing overt with undertone. You could see like the obvious ways that they're making these men seem disgusting, showing their audacity under the lens of the worst possible attributes of audacity. So like eating like just uncaring, making messes all over the table,
Checking
and
out
really
the waitress as
fisheye
well.
lensing that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
getting real into it, really showing us. We notice those things in real life too. Like we
Yeah.
notice when people are doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it to me is like a real overt way to like really show it, to make sure that you're not used to what you're seeing. I'm used to seeing people treat people and act like that, eat like that. But it still grosses me out when I see it. But I also just kind of shove it back for propriety, right? And when you show it like that, there's no ignoring it. You got to see these people for what they are, and you got to
Yeah.
see these disgusting behaviors for what they are. They're very highlighted, which is filmmaking, sure. Like you got to show what you got to show, and you got to make sure
Yeah.
it's not missed in some cases. So I think they did a really good job with making that very overt. But then there's these undertones of metaphor that they put in there that, yeah, they're overt in some ways, but also so subtle.
Mhm.
So you have like the constant discussion around balance. You are one. You got to maintain balance.
Mhm.
Obviously, her wanting to take this surgery is very akin to plastic surgeries, keeping up the latest treatments so that you can stay young, relevant to current beauty standards, which most of the time are fictional, photoshopped, and unachievable. How you see people who lose balance with some of those treatments become monsters. And I see that with women a lot is we have to either go, face our insecurities that society is throwing at us to be marketable, or if we go too far, we become kind of monstrous and, Oh, she got plastic surgery. Can you believe that? Like, you could tell that she's got a new nose, or she's gone too far with the face filler and the Botox. She looks unrecognizable. You know, you think of actresses like Renee Zellweger, Jennifer Grey, what's her face? The Donatella Versace, you know,
Oh yeah.
who have gone
Purple
through
heart. Just gotta say, you gotta say it with a purple heart at the end. It's
Well,
an
even
internet
her.
joke. It's an internet joke. Purple
Oh,
heart.
I
The
don't.
Donatella Versace. Nobody. Just me. Okay, I'm on the online too much. I'm sorry. Go
You're
on.
chronically online now,
On the
Emma.
online, I like that.
But even Demi
But you see them
herself being criticized for her plastic surgery.
correct. Yeah, and it's so there's no winning. I mean, the society, especially capitalism, really loves to vilify women in all ways, at all points in their life. And I think this film does that both overtly and covertly in a way that is very balanced, to the point where you get a bit for any audience. Anybody can watch this film and get something from it without feeling like they're being bashed against the side of the head with other people's messaging. And that's difficult to do with something as hated by the world as women. So like, it is so easy to hate women. And this film, we're still watching two women hate each other through the whole thing. At the
Yeah.
behest of these disgusting men that are like eating with their mouths open, talking about boobs on their faces instead of someone's nose because of the proportions. Like, yeah, I love
I
this
love those
film.
scenes when it looks like they're judging each other, when like Sue comes out of it and like she sees like Elizabeth was eating all weekend and and making a big mess and being totally gross in her
That's
opinion, and she just
self-hate,
judges
right?
her. Yeah,
See,
yeah.
And
I
that
want to touch on
Elizabeth
that.
chooses not to like when it's her turn, she just sits and watches TV and does nothing. Like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
myself when she's also herself when she's Sue.
Yeah.
I'm at the
That's
time
what
of rest. I do want to ask a question, and I mean this in because I doubt Mr. Bits or Tyler, like you don't see yourself in Harvey or any of the men in this movie because they're all vapid characters, and it's amazing that even when she's El Monstrous Eliza Sue,
Sue,
when a
yeah.
guy with a clipboard and like he opens the door to the studio, like, oh good, you're here, come on in. He doesn't even look or care. There's really no male character that is a full person, but seeing this as, you know, how do you both feel?
So I actually think that it's pretty spot on to the way that males are. This may be an exaggeration of some males, but a lot of men just kind of have this kind of underlying. So it's not, men aren't going to like this movie in a lot of ways because they're going to feel called out, and honestly, they should be. So
Well, I mean, as an empathetic person, because you're not Harvey, you know, we know you're
Right.
not Harvey. So, like, it's interesting. Did you feel like it gave more perspective? And also, you think of the older man and young nurse, like he's also taken the substance. I mean, did you
Right.
have any relation to that?
Well, yes. So I have no teeth. And so the teeth scene, I know this isn't related to the male part of it, but I related to what it's like to be different than most people, because most people have all of their teeth, or at least have false teeth. And so I always feel the pressure that Elizabeth feels about feeling like the other or feeling outcast, even if everyone else isn't feeling that. Which I think they really get into in this film, about her feeling these things when it's not necessarily true. Fred is a good example of somebody who still finds her extremely attractive. And
But she still can't
judge
bring
her.
herself
But
to
she
see him.
can't bring herself.
Yes,
Right.
like that scene
So
of
I
her
relate
putting
to that.
Yeah. Mhm.
As far as the male characters, I hate all of them. I guess
I
maybe
love
I
that
don't
you
know what
relate
you.
to Elizabeth. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I do. I
That's,
really
and
do.
that's
Well,
that's
I'm
a
almost
kind of
50, so
perspective I
like
want to hear.
it's kind of both. Like I'm almost the age of the character. I am not the good looking guy I was in my 20s. Not that I thought I was then either, but you know what I mean. I can look back and go, oh, okay, you still had no wrinkles, you had teeth, you weren't as big. I understand beating yourself up about the way you look, and so I could relate to her on that level. The rest of the levels, the pressures of being a woman, I can empathize with, but I cannot relate directly.
You've never thrown up a boob on the stage?
Only, well, There was the time in '86, but we don't need to go into that.
I'm sorry, a sensitive issue. But Tyler,
no,
what do
it's
Tyler,
okay.
what do you think? How do you feel?
To put it quite plainly, men suck, bro. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you suck. Like, I don't know what to. Every time someone's like, "Yeah, you guys suck," I'm like, "Yeah, no, we do. Yep, I
Yep.
completely agree." But yeah, I mean, I also relate to like Sue in like that sense. Like, I think that's why I'm literally turning 31 in like a couple like the end of this month, and I'm even starting to sort of feel like certain things about getting older, or I mean even that's why that's why I work out and stuff. Like there's a part of me that I know does it because I want to, you people work out to feel good, look good. And then I'm also battling that sort of I have that also that internal war, right? We want validation from
Yeah.
outside people. Do I look
But
good?
not too
Do
much.
I
Well,
feel
that's why
good?
you're always walking around
Right,
with your shirt
right.
off in your TikToks.
Right?
Right, because I need it. Like,
We'll
But
validate
you are seeking
I will-
validation in the
I will
same way.
validate you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
and the problem
I
is,
did
like, the
want
movie is
to. I
like,
did
yeah,
want to.
like I'm weak. Men are weak, bro. I was like,
That's not untrue. That is not
I
untrue.
can't do
I-
this.
Emma at
I
the
need
very
the support.
beginning brought up the consciousness thing, and I want to push back on that a little, at least not from the behind the scenes stuff, but from the film itself. I was under the complete impression that each 7 days was to the own character. They woke up and were like, "What is going on here? What did you do to me? This isn't cool." And I kept getting this impression that there was no connection. But then the monster at the end kind of has memories from both.
Well, even
which
I
was
think
interesting.
when we get those kind of weird things that feel like dream sequences, like when Sue is with the guy and he unzips
The
her back and all these
motorcycle,
things,
yeah.
yes, fall out, and then we wake up with Elizabeth. She's kind of dreaming this kind of toxic, kind of subconscious about what Sue was doing. And same thing with Sue when she pulls out that chicken bone. She is relating to stuff that Elizabeth is doing, but on a subconscious level. So
So it's there.
yes, I got a subconscious connection, but not as clear as her kind of knowing what Sue said in a
So
situation.
that
with
fog
somebody
in a
familiar.
dream that you wake up
Yeah.
with, right? And then you go and then you're like, "Oh, it really did happen. What a bitch. Why is she doing this to me?"
I wouldn't have been as
Yeah.
clear if I didn't hear it from the director's mouth. I felt the same way you guys did.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I just heard it from
I
the
agree.
director's mouth, and that's how I saw maybe there's some vague memories there, but generally.
Yeah.
So I think it's not supposed to be there
They know exactly
100%
what the other was
there,
doing,
Right.
but
but
there is
it's
a
enough.
subconscious understanding of what the other person kind of was into when
Right.
they were away. Because all Elizabeth is doing all day is eating chickens, and then she's like pulling this chicken
Good for
bone out,
her.
and it's
Yeah.
not real. Yeah.
I want that
yeah,
French
I felt-
cookbook. Yeah.
I
I
loved all
felt
the
Black
snake.
Swan. Oh,
I
Sorry.
love all this, just real quick. I love all the snake imagery, even though the robe is technically a dragon, and then she has the snake skin bodysuit when she was on the motorcycle that was unzipped. It's like the shedding of the skin. That's it.
Oh, yeah.
I was kind of
Oh.
Black Swanned a little bit before watching The Substance because I had rewatched Black Swan pretty
Oh.
quickly or shortly before this. So for me, the whole time I was watching The Substance, in my mind, they were just one person. And even though they had these competing ideas, it was very much like Black Swan to me. And that's the frame of mind I was in.
Okay.
So
You were
everything
able to
one
kind of
did,
read
the
into
other
those
was
things.
doing too, but they were doing it with different personalities. Very much like Black Swan, where spoiler alert, I guess.
It was an older movie than the two.
They're the
than
one person.
The Substance.
You know, like, so to me, it's like it felt like everything one did to the other was a form of self-hatred, of self-inflicting wounds, self-mutilation. All of that was done to the self. And
Leaving
how
each other naked
we
on the
are-
bathroom floor.
Yeah, that was so mean.
And just like
Yeah.
throwing each other's
I
bodies
had hope
around.
too for a minute when
Yes.
she built the room, and I was like, "Oh,
just
she's
to like
never
hide her
gonna-
away so she doesn't have to look
And
at
she
her.
just
Yeah.
like
Put
carelessly
a bed
dragged
in
her, and
there.
she like
Puts
it's
all
like-
her clothes in a box, like her,
No, so like
Elizabeth's
on this point
junk.
though, I think that it would make sense if Sue didn't treat Elizabeth with that. Well, in fact, she put a towel under her head. It was like the most compassion she had for her. But the fact that Elizabeth didn't like, at least in the first week, like put Sue somewhere nice and like treat that
when you
lady
hate
with
yourself,
respect.
you hate
know?
yourself through and
Yeah, I
through,
guess
my
you,
friend.
you do. That's
Yeah.
a good point.
I
That's a very good point.
constantly feel this myself whenever I look at old videos or pictures of myself, like how stupid are you for thinking you were fat? How dumb
Right?
are you for
Yes.
thinking that you weren't pretty,
100%.
that you weren't enough? Like, I can't believe that. And there's a sense of almost like, I hate my younger self sometimes for that. Like
For thinking that.
how you
Yeah.
didn't treasure those moments, how you didn't get out of your
Mhm.
own mentality and
Yeah.
head. And
They
like,
screwed up my credit really
that
bad,
is
my younger self. I'm
Oh,
very
me
angry
too.
at yeah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's
Credit's
fixed
kinda
now.
messed up.
It's
real,
fixed now.
guys.
It's fixed now. So that's
But that's how
That's actually-
that's how I took the film, is that
Yeah.
it's the same perspective. It's still
Right.
self-hate. Like,
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I feel the rushing cloud of aging and death on me.
Oh my
And then at the
god.
same time, like, well, it's true. Like, when
Yeah.
especially since I started TikTok, I can see very drastically, going back and watching some of my first videos and my latest videos, the difference in my face. You get to see my aging over the last 2 years.
Right.
And it's just
I don't-
forever.
I've seen some of your old TikToks because I'm nostalgic, and online chronically, I can't see the age. It's I know I
you
see
You look
wouldn't.
the same to me.
You do not look at yourself,
yourself
with
the way other
same
people look
lens
at
that
you.
other
Yeah.
people look at
That's a
you.
fair point.
However, other people's lens will influence the way you look at yourself, but not the other way around. I'll never explain to you guys how I feel about myself, and you ever have an inch of understanding on that. But your thoughts on me will always move the needle for me. And that's
Interesting.
that's just how it is. When
Well,
the
there's
other
still,
thing
I
is-
mean, how many people on this panel still remember what that douchebag said in 6th grade? Because I absolutely still remember what that douchebag said in 6th grade about
the
that
worst thing I
personality.
ever got was, "It's not Halloween," and I'm like, yeah, it's too bad, isn't it? Sorry, it's not Halloween, Emma, or you're a fake goth because you shop at Hot Topic. I'm like, I'm a teenager, and I'm lucky I can sometimes afford Hot Topic. So
That's ridiculous. The
Every day should be Halloween.
homages. Agreed. Solid agree. The homage. Actually, yeah, I married on Halloween. Sorry, I'm
oh,
biased.
that's so cute. I
Yeah, we
love
have matching
that.
Halloween tattoos. Like, yeah.
That's cute.
Wife is obsessed with horror on the Justine Emma level. Like, she's like, well, and even Janine is obsessed with horror, but she doesn't present it as clearly. But the love is there.
Well, Janine, you're more rounded. That's all.
Oh, I like that. I like that
I like it too.
interpretation.
I wish I was more
Um,
rounded like you sometimes, Janine, because I love Marvel just as much. And I try to talk
Well, this is
about
what the real
it.
study
But
is
I
for.
horror, I guess.
We love
Yeah,
film, right?
express your
We
other
wanna
niches of things.
We want to explore all
Okay.
films. So, if you want to come back for a Marvel episode, Justine, don't hesitate. We would love to have you. And we can wax comic book. The thing I liked a lot about it, there's a ton of stuff to like, but there was definitely homages to so many horror films throughout. And as much as she might not have said that Cronenberg was an inspiration, the scene in the elevator where she rips off her fingernail and her ear falls off felt very right out of The Fly. So
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
like, this is literally right out of The Fly. This is, but then you also have the shining hallway, which is really beautiful.
Oh,
You
yeah,
have the
some
moments of
great visuals.
2001, A Space Odyssey visuals. But I even at the end was like, oh wow, this is Evil Dead level blood.
Kind
Like,
of insanity, like over the
right.
top. Yeah.
Loved
Brain Dead.
Um,
Oh, it
Loved
reminded
it.
me instantly of Brain Dead.
Brain Dead. Yes!
Brain Dead,
Best
yes.
blood we've
The
seen.
Yeah.
the pulled face. I was like, Brain Dead. This is totally the cover of Brain Dead.
And the
Um,
The
shooting
giant rat mother with
blood
the
and-
big boobs.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
awesome.
all of that. That's
But then
exactly what
the
that
head
is.
at the end was the thing. Like it was very much like a
Yes.
version of the spider head. Like it was in the same vein. So she paid tribute to all the best body horror with this film, which I loved.
They did a lot
adored.
of the special effects in a place they called the lab, where they didn't need the actors, but where they did all the close-ups.
Mm.
And Fargo was a part of a lot of it, and she was like, "There's a lot of body parts we see that are her," because she's like, "I want to experience that. That's gross."
That's
And
awesome.
I'm like, I do too. I could just be in the lab, and I'll do work for free just to
Yeah.
be here, because that is so cool.
You
True
can
body
tell
horror. Yeah, here's my body.
instantly.
Make horror out of it, right? Enjoy.
It's not
Um,
hard.
You can tell like almost instantly when a director really loves special effects because of their love of special effects versus just feeling like they have to be included to do this shocking thing. You could tell that when practical effects get involved, that there is a love there for it. And
Yes.
there's something about body horror that the minute that there's CGI over practical effects, it loses its heart. And
Agreed.
there's something so tangible about practical effects. And if a director loves practical effects, like Emma was just saying how excited she was to get like involved, like she had to be a part of it. You sense that in a film, and I think it directly impacts a film's success
100%.
every time.
So I want to say two final things, and then we do need to rate the film because we are running out of time. The color grading between Sue and Elizabeth, where we kind of the color grading would go up a little bit, and there'd be more brightness and a ton of glitter.
Yeah.
I love saturation. I loved seeing
Neon.
that kind of next to each other. There was also another element that is subtle, but whenever in the beginning it was Elizabeth, all the technology around her, not that she didn't have a cell phone, but it all felt older. The cars were actually older model cars. She used an old vacuum.
There's a
and
shot
then-
where it's like Sue's cell phone next to Elizabeth's landline.
Right.
Like she's got this ruler, yeah.
and it's very like showing old and new. But even
And it's
the
a
moment where
network show.
Sue,
Where it's like in the crosswind, like that doesn't really exist now.
Right.
So it's kind of like
Yeah.
it could be whenever.
right, and there was an element of I couldn't tell when this is happening. The cell phone kind of ruins it, but it's okay. But when Elizabeth is on the cell phone, she was actually trying to almost utilize her younger self by putting herself out there for a date, and so it made sense that she was using new technology. And so it's these little. There's so much to pick up in this movie. Is kind of what I'm saying. That's a lot to do. But bye, Monty. Enjoy. You didn't hear us rate, but that's okay. That's okay. You can watch later.
Oh, there's
so
a
let
chat.
us-
I totally missed it. So
There
if
is a
anybody
chat.
said anything I'm so sorry. I don't see the chat.
I don't see the chat either. Sorry.
I'm so sorry if
It's
someone
on
said
the
something.
left there. If you want to see what they're saying.
Oh well, too late. But I'm just
yeah.
like everyone in the chat's like no one said anything to anything you and Justine said.
I've been chatting with them on the side. It's okay. That's kind of.
I just want everyone. I didn't see you. I'm sorry.
It's
I
our
didn't know
fault.
it
We
was
should have
there.
told you. That is our mistake. So I apologize. Let's go ahead and rate the substance though, and then we'll talk about next week and thank our guests, and we'll go from there. Let's go in the same order. Emma, are you gonna null again? You're gonna give it just that little.
Well, this is a very esteemed rating. I think it's definitely in my top 20 films I love of all time. It's
That
not
is a heck of a rating.
Yeah, I mean it's not Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, but it is fantastic.
Awesome. Love it. Janine.
I loved this movie. I thought it was incredibly creative. It's The Fly meets Death Becomes Her, so I'm giving it a 10.
That's
10.
a
I like
perfect
that.
description. I fucking love that.
It really is. It's kind of both of those things. And quite literally in some parts. Tyler, you were gonna rate the substance.
Not to copy you, but I think I'm also gonna give it a 10. And someone mentioned in the chat that like this might be. I think it might be a possible contender for Best Picture. I think it might be kind of awesome if it does.
Oh my
Like,
gosh, that
we've
would be
seen
the
weirder things
coolest.
get voted, right?
Yeah.
I'd be like,
Is it
damn,
even
some
nominated, or
recognition.
we don't know yet? I don't think they put out
Uh,
nominations
No,
yet.
not yet.
No.
It's a genre
fun.
film. I hate that for comedies and musicals too, because a comedy and
Yeah.
they're also lumped into the genre films, and it's like drama is a genre. Like, drama is a genre. What are we talking
Well,
about?
musicals fare better, I think, than
They do.
Yeah,
they have a
they
better
do.
shot at it.
yeah.
But they're also usually dramas. You don't find the comedy musicals making their way into the categories at all.
That's true.
So,
Your Les Mises are what they're all about. You know?
yeah, and if it's going to be horror, I don't know, and I hate to say this, I think it does deserve at least a nod. But I think that this film it's going to be left in the dust. I don't think they'll even nominate it.
I
don't
think
like the
Demi,
Academy.
I feel Demi maybe getting a nomination, but I don't think she would win.
The Academy was
if she gets a
created by
nod.
Louis B. Mayer because the actors were trying to unionize. So he's like, okay, let's give them something where they get little trinkets, and then they don't care about money and unionizing so much.
Right.
And
right.
people like Johnny Depp and Mel Gibson are still very much a part of the Academy. I know the awards still give money and attention to actors and films. And so I'm not saying it isn't without value, but it's like it's the Dennis Quaid as Harvey is the Academy to me. Like, gross. Why
Yeah.
ew?
I mean,
Yeah.
Dennis Quaid
Yeah.
is Harvey,
Yeah.
if you want to get right down to it. But we
Oh, well,
don't
he
need to get
is
into
in
that,
real
yeah.
life too, kind of.
Yeah,
So,
so-
Yeah,
but
Justine.
I think the best thing that comes out of it is forcing people to watch these movies they might not have seen before.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
especially people that don't watch films regularly, they're like they watch like a few films a year. Like, okay, this won an Academy Award, so I'll check it out.
Yes.
I'll see if that's any good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Justine.
So I would give it 9 out of 10. I think that there is still a level of, I mean, if we're putting it in the perspective of getting more people to watch films like this, I think maybe a little too crazy, a little too culty almost
Pulls it
with
out of
some
the
of the
mainstream.
delivery that it does pull it out of the mainstream a little bit, which could hurt its chances for things like
Mhm.
award season. You see things like Silence of the Lambs, The Exorcist. Those are the types of films that, they're like borderline thrillers. So
Ground
those are
Cast.
Especially in
just
There's
Silence
horror
of the
in there.
Lambs,
Grounded, at least.
where a cop
Yeah.
is hung up with his
Guts
Right.
out.
gutted, with his guts hanging
Yeah.
out, and then Hannibal Lecter wears somebody else's face.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a horror film. I'm sorry.
I don't think
thriller.
it's not a
You
horror
see
film.
someone's, with a sewing machine sewing skin together. That's
Yeah.
not
Oh,
a
yeah.
horror movie.
You-
Or a
you're
woman
knowing
in a
thriller
well
Guys.
in the
I believe it's
basement.
a
Not a
horror
horror
film.
movie.
I believe it's a horror film.
Don't make me hurt your dog.
That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is
no,
is that
I'm just joking. That's
definitely- yeah.
like people that say it's a psychological thriller.
one great thing about this
Right,
film, though,
right.
that will bring it, I think, to the masses is Demi Moore's performance. Her performance is
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
good that I think it will get an award for that. If they don't give her an award, then they'll give it to Pamela Anderson. But I don't want to predict the awards too much in this review. I will say that I loved this film. It touched me very on a psychological level. It like
Mhm.
mentally changed some things for me. And I haven't been able to get out of a brain fog since watching it about what I'm going to
That's
do
a really
with it.
good rating, actually. I like films
What-
that physically affect a person. I love that.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
what am I
felt
going to do with
queasy after
this
this movie.
going on up here? I feel a little bit like there's a monster in here, kind of.
A monster.
Under the-
Just
Yeah. I'm going to end up with a boob on my face tomorrow. I don't know. But there's something
As long as you don't
changing.
puke one out of your eye, I think you'll be okay. I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
Which eye? I mean,
I mean, does it matter? I mean, letting a boob
How
out of
many
any
do I
eye,
have?
you know.
How many eyes do I have now? I've lost count.
Yeah,
I
no,
gotta
that was
say,
interesting.
this film needs more conversation around it, and I already see the discussions waning, and it breaks my heart.
Well, I'm glad we could at least try to bring it back up and get it back into the people's minds.
This was a year for
Um,
horror, though.
It really will be. I'm hoping. We'll see. This should be a good year for film. Maybe 2025 will really kick up and be a great year for
If
film.
nothing
Horror's
else,
coming.
please
Horror's
be a
coming
great year
full
for film.
force.
Yeah.
This generation likes
What is
it.
everybody? I mean, I don't mean to. Maybe we don't have time, but is there a film any of you are really not horror in general, but really excited to see this year? Because I haven't been
Superman.
keeping up. Superman.
I
Yeah,
want to see Superman
Superman.
badly.
Am I the only one that's not excited about that?
Did
I'm
you
not
watch the
excited
trailer?
about it.
No. To be fair, I
Watch the
have not.
trailer.
I did watch
Yeah.
the documentary, and watching Christopher Reeves and Robin Williams together made me like sob
It was
uncontrollably.
a brilliant documentary. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
brilliant.
So
Since you watched that, watch the trailer, and you might be like, "Oh, they went back to that Reeves. They kind of went back into that."
ooh,
You know.
tempting me.
Yeah.
I will watch it.
The vibes
Okay.
are nostalgic for sure.
For myself, because I didn't rate it yet, I do want to rate it. I do give this a 9 out of 10. I'm not sure why I'm not going to give it a 10. Probably because I don't think I'm going to watch it a lot, much like The Fly.
Yeah,
I do
rewatchability
really love the
is
film,
a
but
huge part of
Same.
your rating.
yeah, so that's where I put my ratings is rewatchability.
I watched it
so.
5 times now.
Oh wow!
I
Wow.
love it.
Yeah, this was
Yeah, I'm
my
still
favorite.
digesting
I
it. You
watch
know?
it
I
again.
love when she's cooking the French cuisine is one of
Just
my
going
favorite
crazy and
scenes.
criticizing
The
the
egg
interview.
scene.
Yeah.
Right?
And she's like,
The egg scene.
you wouldn't exist without me. And which also
Right.
points to, younger actors not giving enough homage to what became before. But I love all the growth. I loved
How sloppy that scene is, yeah.
and
It's
how
very
Sloppy is
crazy
a
her
great
eyes
word
are.
for the
How
whole
visceral.
film. It's a
Yeah.
sloppy film, and not that it's sloppily made. It's just
Ooh, Mickey
Floppy
17. I'm
visuals.
really excited
Ooh,
about
yeah.
that too.
Oh, Mickey
Mickey 17
17.
is
Yeah,
another one.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic
I
Four. I'm
can't
also
even-
excited about because I love Marvel. So
Who's
I
in
can't
that?
even tell you what's coming out
Pedro.
next year.
Yeah,
Pedro
me
Pascal.
either, Justine. That's why I
Pedro
asked. I'm
Pascal,
like,
Joseph
what's going on?
Quinn. Yeah.
Like, what is coming out next year?
there's like 5 superhero movies coming out this year, so there's a lot. All right. So next, actually, I don't know what we're watching next week. I don't know if it's Alien Romulus, but in a week or two, we will be doing Alien and Alien Romulus with Mr. Marvelite, who will be joining us for that episode. Stay tuned on the Discord and in our TikToks and whatnot for what movies we'll be watching next week. We're probably going to make Tyler
Ooh,
pick because
hyena.
it's been a little while, so we'll see what he says. That said, do follow all of us, and we want to thank our guests, JustineUFF and Emma of the Impact from the Let Us In podcast. Thank you very much for being here. 100%. You guys are always welcome. Actually, Justine, this is your third episode with us, I believe. You've been on the show a few times.
Third?
Yeah.
Really?
Maybe second.
Maybe second.
And Crystal and Justine used to tease me, being like, "You're the favorite." Well, third appearance, I wouldn't say so, Justine.
It might be second. I might be saying that wrong, but
I think it's second.
I'm just,
It's
it's
second.
light. I
Yeah.
don't mean that. Just, it's all in fun.
right.
We have
Hey.
had a few people on our show though too. So
Nice. Yeah, didn't Brian show up?
Brian's been on
Yeah.
our show.
he did.
for
He did the
cinematography.
cinematography episode that we did.
He was great.
So
He
good.
does miss you guys. He's ill. That's why he's not here. He actually started
He was
coming
ill
down with
last
something,
time
so,
too, wasn't
yeah.
he?
He was. It is convenient. You're not
Do I
wrong.
make you ill, Brett?
He knew you were going to be
Give him a message
bashing
and find out.
Emily Blunt. That's why he didn't show.
Right.
I like Emily Blunt though.
Which makes him like you that
Speaking
much
of
more. I'll just
filler,
say.
she's been in the discussion about that too.
About
So-
filler, like face filler.
Yeah, they're hating on her for face filler. Like, leave my girl alone.
Let people age, man. Leave
Well,
people
now, I
alone.
do think that was part of what Farjo said, is that as long as you're doing it for yourself and not others, like, get plastic surgery, get a boob on your face. As long as it's
Right.
for you.
How do you guys
Would one
separate
right
that?
here look
How?
good?
Is there a little switch in your brain that turns off how you take in other people's opinions on you?
No.
I got a
just
boob
like,
job in
I'm going to
2021,
make sure
and I
that
love
this
it.
doesn't impact my decisions.
Right.
Like,
With all that said, this has been episode 15 of season 4 of The Real Study. We do appreciate you guys all being here, and do see us next time here on YouTube and other platforms. Have a good night, guys.
Bye.
Thanks
Keep
for
the
joining
balance,
us
y'all.
all.
Keep the balance.
Keep the back.